Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing excellent. Tonight I'm out here in the garage continuing work on the FC, and what we're going to be working on is the wiring. I want to pull out the stock engine harness and get the Haltech harness laid in, as well as get the fuel pump relay wired up. And I got to double check the instructions, but I think for the wideband controller I have, since I'm daisy chaining it using one of the Haltech's functions to be able to daisy chain on the CAN bus, I need to wire in its own power relay as well. So I'm starting up front here in the engine bay. I already removed one of the ignition coils and the charcoal canister, so I can get at the wiring harness, which comes out right here. And this is from the stock ECU, which is right in here. In a previous video I made this wonderful mount for the Haltech, and trying to keep the stock ECU in location, because eventually what I'd like to do is be able to run dual sensors, so I can run the stock ECU just so that I can get the warning lights and stuff on the dash all to work. But just to get it prepped for this first round, I'm going to keep the ECU there, but I need to unplug this part of the wiring harness. And what I'd like to do is get it out without cutting it. Last time on the other FC, I did end up cutting it, and I would like not to do that. But for right now, let's go ahead and see if I can pull this rat's nest of wiring. Whew. Well, that was actually way easier than I remember. Don't know why I had to cut it before, because that came out really well, which is fantastic. So this is the complete S5 engine harness right there, and it's intact. It's all original. It is JDM, and it will be for sale soon. And here, side by side, is the stock harness and the Haltech harness. So it's not simpler by any means, which is important, because you got to think the engine was running with all these sensors, all these inputs and outputs, and you need as much, if not more, to run it with a higher level of performance and safety. So first problem I see is that this grommet is significantly smaller than this grommet, which is unfortunate. So I'm gonna have to figure out how to get that to stay in place, but that's not a huge deal. But let's look at the harness briefly. So here we have the plugs into the Haltech. This is the premium version, which comes with a pre-wired fuse block. We have all these extra inputs and outputs here. Power. As we go down here, everything is pre-labeled in this premium harness. And I've gone ahead and pulled out and edited this harness quite a bit, because I have a relocated battery. So I pulled the power back through this grommet, took out some features that I don't need, and then also just bundled up things so it'll be easier to route. I pulled through one of the outputs that I know goes to the tachometer for the dash, and we have the controller for the bypass boost control, bypass air control valve. And I'm pretty sure one of these, I believe this one, the main difference between the original harness I had when I built the other FC to this one is that this is not pre-wired for ethanol, but I do have the sensor here, so we'll be wiring that in like so. And yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and just start laying this in. This is one of the reasons why I have the interior out of the car, so that I can run it all nicely, neatly, exactly where I want it, and get it back to where power is going to be run. And I have the fuse blocked with the relays right there. So I guess I'm going to go ahead and slap this baby in. Well, the wiring harness is in. The grommet is roughly in place, although again it's not sized correctly. I have to figure that out. But my beautiful little mounting solution down here is not going to work. So there's a couple reasons for that. One, as I mentioned before, this was rubbing up top here. And these are not going to make the bend around to plug in here. And I need to find a home for the fuse block. So that's okay, because this can be moved around quite easily. But I do think I'm going to have to lose the stock ECU to make room for it, because I could possibly turn this sideways and fit this somewhere there. And there's room behind this mounting bracket to go even deeper, and then I can still keep that plate cover. So I'm going to work on that and see what I can figure out, and we'll go from there, I guess. Okay, I found roughly where I'll need to mount everything. Oh, come on. So I found roughly where I'll need to mount everything. You can see all the holes are lined up there. So if I pull this out, I have to put the fuse block all the way over here, sunken down, in order to get it. So I have to figure out a way to mount that. I don't feel like drilling through the body of the car, but we'll figure that out. And then the Haltech can fit in here nicely. I should probably do it like that and see if there's any, if it's touching at all, which it probably will be. That is going to be a bit of a challenge. Anyway, I can probably just bring it forward and mount it on these two nut holes down here from the original bracket, and then use these to mount that metal plate in. Obviously, I'm not going to put the metal plate in right away, because I'm going to need to access the fuse block as we work out the kinks of getting this wiring harness installed, and we will probably blow fuses. I'd be surprised if we didn't. And this will allow us to plug everything in on the side there. So I guess I'm gonna leave it right now as a rough draft and go ahead and route all the wires. The encouraging thing is this is for the power lead, this is the fuel pump trigger wire. They're going to be able to fit nicely along here, where there is already wiring tucked down in there, and we have this nice cover that goes on it. So I'm going to just go ahead and start cleaning up the wiring, make it fit nicely and route correctly, so that I can get a really good idea of where we're going to be when we do start bolting stuff down. So I've been taking my time very deliberately. I've got everything mock mounted up in here. Got it tucked away using some of the stock mounting points for the wiring, so it's following along where existing wiring is, so everything on the panels and the carpet should go back in and fit just fine. Right down here, I've been able to route everything, so I have the power cable that goes through, the fuel pump trigger. This is the bundle of extra inputs and outputs that you have, and I just pulled it back here because this pink wire here that's going into the back, that's the trigger for turning on the actual Haltech. And it's in that bundle of wires. So it's sitting right back here. I think I'm just gonna lay them down under the carpet, because this is actually an easy place to access. If you just lean the seats forward, you can pull this up. So if I need to get any, I can grab them from here and pull them through wherever I need to the car, and also access the main fuse panel next to the battery. So everything's tucked away nicely. I'm just really taking my time. These black and red wires here are going to go to a relay to power the daisy chain CAN bus system, which is right up in here. So I pulled those along nicely. Everything's tucking up really good, and I'm passing everything back into the battery bay area with plenty of extra, so I can get it all wired up. And again, yeah, just taking my time. I've really learned to actually enjoy wiring, but you have to take your time so you don't get anything tangled up. I'm glad I have the whole interior pulled out for this. So I'm going to go ahead and try and like lightly button this up, and then get everything terminated in the back. Pretty tired. It's been hours. If I can show you around, I have every single tool, drill, wire strippers, wires, heat gun, heat shrink, riv nut thing. I got a label maker right here. Picked this up today. More heat shrink. Don't worry about that. All to spend plenty of time getting these wires run nice and neatly. I have a P-clamp back here holding them in place, and getting everything ready. Oops, I forgot one thing. Let me plug this in just so we can see it. Okay, to basically create this thing. I made this before in a mock-up, and this mounts inside the battery tray like this. Or not, it's now the battery tray, it used to be a storage bin. And basically it's not the cleanest looking, but it is very functional and it is pretty organized actually, especially once I mount the interior back in, you'll see. But I used basically everything here to get nice wire runs. Oh my gosh, I'm sitting in the car here on the floor, uncomfortable, but let me talk you through it real quick. So I labeled everything so that I know what's what, because obviously there's a lot going on here, and God forbid someone else had to work on my car, they'll know what's what. So let's see, where should I start? So obviously you can see here I need to power the CAN daisy chain system for the Haltech, so that's what this relay is for, and this is for the fuel pump, and this is what's going to feed out to the fuel pump, and we'll ground it here. This is going to be grounded to the battery right here. So we have the CAN ground here. This is the interior lights and stuff for the car, because for some reason the wiring's kind of hacked up behind the dash, so we found that if we back probed a wire we were able to get everything to work, so that's run back here. We have the fused power inputs for the CAN and the fuel pump here, which is on 10 gauge. The grounding for the two relays there. The trigger wire here comes off of the Haltech for the fuel pump. The trigger wire here comes off of 12 volt ignition, so when we turn on the key it'll give power to all the CAN accessories plugged into the Haltech. This right here is the ECU switch, so this whole little sub block will get 12 volt ignition from this wire, which goes behind the steering column into the ignition switch and is turned on with the key and stays on while the car is running. So that will trigger the Haltech to turn on. They're fused up. I just put some random fuses in there. Just I need to change the actual amperage so it's right, but these are 30 amps, which is good for the relays. And yeah, so the other wires here, this is for the amp, and that mounts up in the battery tray as well, this fuse here. So, oh my gosh, I need to take a quick break, and I figured a good time to provide an update. But it's, you know, it's a lot of snipping, crimping, putting heat shrink on. The heat shrink is not any significance. I was just using small pieces I had to insulate the blade connectors as they go up, because you can use, let's see, these style of harnesses right here to plug into the bottom, but because I want to run different gauge wires, I depinned some of these and reused them, and then just made my own for other ones. In fact, I think what I'm going to do for the trigger wire to keep it all coherent, that everything 12 volt ignition is yellow, so I'm going to go ahead and grab one of these yellow ones and put it up here instead of this one, just to make it a little bit simpler. But yeah, now what I need to do is connect everything for the fuel pump, run those wires. I want to get everything cleaned up a little bit more, mounted up, and then I think I'm going to go ahead and throw back in the interior, because I think I'm done in the back. We already did the subframe, we did the fuel pump, about to do the fuel pump wiring, did the fuel lines. So I think from this point back we're done, which is great because that's a lot of progress. So I'm going to take a quick break, get that started, and then if you think it looks messy now, when I show you it all mounted up, it's going to look much, much better. So I think I'm also going to drill some holes in that plastic plate and do some zip ties to hold those wires a little bit more neatly. Might get to that, might not, but so far I'm pretty happy with it. All right, so I'm tired. Seems to be the routine nowadays, but I'm grinding on this project. I'm loving it. So I got the interior back in after I had installed a harness bar, because I realized putting the interior back in that, oh my gosh, if I don't get this done, I'm going to have to backtrack on my installation. So that's another video. But right back in this bin here is that whole mess, but organized, of wires that we were looking at before. Let's see what it looks like. And of course it hits the harness bar now, but still easily accessible. Let me get some light in here. Right. So obviously the battery's not hooked up, but if it were, it'd be something like this, right? We have the power cables coming off in different directions, but that's just because they're routed that way and it makes it easier. So not the best looking, but very functional. And then over here is the whole fuse block that I was working on with all the relays. So as you can see, the wires are more about function than form, but still very nice and neat. So this is again input for the 12-volt ignition. This is my little subwoofer amp fuse, and then we've got our 2 relays right here. And what's cool is that I can pop these 2 off separate of this whole panel. If I need to change, service them, work with the connections, I can easily get access to all these fuses. It's weird doing this left-handed, but this just pops off. And all these lights down here, this indicator, will turn red if the fuse is blown, so I don't have to careen my head down in here or underneath the dash to try and figure that out. And the same feature with this little fuse box for the 12-volt ignition. And obviously I have expansion for a lot of different connections I may need to make, both grounds on the top, power here, and 12-volt ignition source over here. And I can pass them easily to the rear of the car, underneath this storage bay, and to the front of the car through just under the carpet here if I need to go up to the dash. Now, all that super interesting stuff being said, I was a madman of whirlwind yesterday getting all that stuff done, so I need to clean up a little bit. So I'm going to sweep up, clean up, see if I have enough energy, and then what I want to do is fire the system up, connected, see if the Haltech turns on, and then I want to look at the Haltech's pinout schematic and see if we can figure out what's what. Moment of truth time. Let's see. Got my accessory wire plugged in the Haltech, got my laptop, batteries connected. Let's see what happens. There's an indicator light here, lets us know if it's on, so let's see. Oh, it's working. Let's see which click it works. Let's see. Oh, great. Okay. Cool, cool. Let's launch the software, see if we can connect. ECU connecting. That's good.
Oh snap. We're connected.
Okay, so it's seeing the sensors. It's freaking out because
there's no motor.
Nothing's connected to the sensors, so well, let's see. Well, let me go to my gauge page. Okay, battery voltage, I have the charger connected, so it's reading that. Manifold air pressure, that's good. So, okay, so everything that's connected looks accurate. It's got 2 errors. Let's see what that is. You're gonna show me? So it's having trouble communicating with their thermocouple amplifier, and it's saying the oil pressure sensor is, yeah, it's not connected. Okay, so I'll have to figure that out before dyno day and everything, but okay, so let's see if I can figure out which plugs are supposed to be which, so I don't wire anything up wrong. Okay, yep, here we go. So oil temperature, fuel pressure, oil pressure, intake, coolant, manifold, throttle. Good, so DPO 1 to the tachometer. I think that's what I have pulled out. Idle control, DPO 4, thermofan, DPO 3, yep. Ignition. Okay. I'm looking for flex fuel. Here we go. SPI 4. Let me check and see if that's all what I pulled through. Alright, so yes, indeed. DPO 1 is what I pulled through for the tachometer. Remembered that. DPO 3 for the fan. And the one I have to rewire is SPI 4, which I already pulled through. So that's great. So I'll work on rewiring all that. We'll go ahead and drop the engine in. And what's great is since the Haltech still sees everything, except for that thermocouple box, I'll work on that. When we drop it in here, we will fill it full of fluids, prime it, and it should be able to start right up. It should know exactly what's going on. So fingers crossed on that one. This has been a tedious but rewarding project. Thank you all so much for watching. Please remember to look at the links in the description below to look at the RPM Act, our own merch, and our social media channels. Please remember to be kind to each other out there, and when they ask you, tell them you want more.